on issues. I'm Councilman Jim Waring. Joining me on today's show is the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors Chairman, Bill Gates. Bill, welcome back to the show, and welcome back to a City of Phoenix facility. Since you served here so honorably a few years ago, we're welcome you back.
Well, I was thrilled when you called and asked me to come on the show. Great to come back and talk a little bit about what we're doing over in Maricopa County.
Well, I was worried when we called you the chairman of the board, we'd think it was Frank Sinatra or something out in the audience, so we're glad to have it be you.
And you don't want me to sing.
No,
so
we don't want you
me.
to sing. No, we do not. But we're glad to have you here. I know you left the city. You were so excited to go to the pastoral vistas, the relaxed county. You knew you had to work hard in Phoenix, and in the county it was just going to be quiet, nobody really paying attention and not being in the news. And I don't think that worked out quite maybe the way you planned it. So you've had kind of a busy year. We talked a year ago at this time about your upcoming chairmanship, and now here we are a year later. I think it took some twists and turns you perhaps couldn't have anticipated. So you want to talk about first kind of the goals that you had and some of the things that have been accomplished?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a great opportunity to serve as chair. We have a wonderful board over there. You know, I miss city council and certainly miss serving with you. But over there we've got a great team, and so I set out some priorities at the beginning of the year. And one of those priorities, we kind of put it under the umbrella of smart government. So to me, what that meant was, how could we focus on using technology to become more efficient in our operations? And also, how could we help to kind of lead this smart region effort? And that's the concept. I know you're very familiar with the smart city concept. You know, how can we use big data? How can we use technology to do a better job of providing services to our residents? And now with the smart region concept, what we've been working is to convene 22 cities and towns from around Maricopa County and work together so that we're not, you know, all going in all these different directions, and instead
eliminate redundancies.
Exactly. And we're really excited. Just had an event last week where that whole effort has a new brand and a logo known as the Connective. So this is, again, working together, all these governments together, and working with the private sector so that Maricopa County can truly be an innovator and a leader as we look forward to using technology to become more efficient and to, of course, improve economic development as well.
It sounds like you made a lot of progress in achieving the goals that you laid out in our show last year.
Definitely we have. But like you said, we've had a few curveballs that sometimes come along, and it's been a challenge, but I think there have been opportunities that have come out of that as well.
So maybe the first thing I'll ask about elections. So there were some issues with the elections in 2018, got a lot of publicity, so no reason to necessarily revisit that. Yeah. But what's happened under your chairmanship that's changed?
Yeah, so we did have challenges both in 2016 and in 2018. And what's happened in Maricopa County since the 1950s, the county recorder has had that full responsibility for elections. Basically, the Board of Supervisors had turned over responsibility for election day operations way back then.
And that's gone pretty smoothly in those intervening 60, 70 years.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, we look at today, Maricopa County is the fourth largest county in the country. We have 4.5 million residents, and having all that responsibilities for elections in one partisan official, it just didn't make sense. So we went to the county recorder, Adrian Fontes, and we said, look, we want to get engaged, and we want to set up a new system where we can ensure successful elections moving forward. And so in June of this year, we were able to hammer out an agreement whereby now we have 6 elected officials who are responsible. So the 5 of us on the Board of Supervisors and the recorder. So what that means is we have 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats who have that responsibility. And we now have an individual by the name of Scott Jarrett, who happens to be an independent, who is now our Elections Day Director. So the Board of Supervisors are directly supervising him, and he is there working alongside the recorder's head of early voting and voter registration, Ray Valenzuela. So the 2 of them are now over elections, and we're working together. And so it's a big change, but already we've seen great results.
Well, it's a big change, and there's no real practical way to practice. They always say that about the NFL, right? I mean, there's no way to replicate, the game day experience for the players. There's no real way to replicate the game day experience, if you will, of the elections. You got 4.5 million people. How many people vote in the
That's
Maricopa
right.
County
well,
elections?
you know, I mean, it depends every year,
Well, it
but
fluctuates,
you know,
sure.
yeah, absolutely. But we're talking about millions of people who will be voting. We anticipate that, given the interest in the 2020 elections, and we'll have 3 elections.
Well, and you have to aim high,
Exactly.
right? You can't if you don't have enough machines and stuff. That's a problem too.
Absolutely,
So
and that was
you have to go for the highest possible.
That's right, and that's another thing that we focused on. So now the Board of Supervisors has approved leasing new machines. So in Maricopa County had the same machines for many, many years. So we'll have new machines, and we're going to have new ballots too. You know, for years people have just kind of completed that arrow. Now we're going to be going back to the ACT and SAT days. We'll be filling in the bubble. So that's going to be great because not only are we going to have more accurate elections, but also we're going to be able to get results
It's a little
out
clearer.
sooner.
I always thought the lines.
Absolutely. So we've got a new organizational structure, we've got new machines, and we've got 3 elections. Presidential preference election on the Democratic side in March, and then of course the primary, which I appreciate the legislature has actually moved election date up to my birthday. So August 4th, I thought that was really special. So August 4th, 2020 will be our primary, and then we'll have the general in November. So we understand the eyes of the country and the world are going to be on Maricopa County. So again, working together as a team, we have great confidence that we'll have successful elections in 2020.
Well, people could take this the right way or the wrong way, but I hope you have a happy birthday. We'll
Thank
put it
you.
that way, sure. So a lot has happened on elections. That is actually obviously something that's a county responsibility that's in the paper a lot. There are a couple other elected officials where there's been some changes. We'll start with the first one that happened first.
Yes.
One of your colleagues resigned to take a different position, and so you had to appoint a replacement supervisor, and that hadn't happened in a while, and not during your tenure.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right. So Denny Barney, who did a great job of service for the East Valley, he left the board to focus on his leadership of the East Valley Partnership. And so we had many candidates who applied for the position, and the only thing that we had to do was to appoint another Republican because Denny Barney.
And you had notice about this.
Oh
too.
yeah, we had.
You
notice
knew about this coming for a while.
We knew this was coming. Many excellent candidates, but in the end, we selected former Chandler City Councilman Jack Sellers. And in addition, Jack heads up the State Transportation Board, so he's done a great job, hit the ground running. He is all over the East Valley, all over District 1, and of course with that transportation expertise is particularly helpful because in the near future we'll be faced with the renewal of the Prop 400 Transportation Fund. So Jack is doing a great job.
And he was an experienced person, so that's not surprising, with a lot of experience in that particular community. So, but you know, you did have a lot of notice on the first. On the second, new county attorney,
right.
past county attorney Bill Montgomery is now Justice
That's right.
Montgomery, so we'll have to genuflect if we see him in the halls and so forth.
course.
But so he was gone. But you actually had some notice on that too because he applied twice and wasn't selected the first time and then was selected the second time. So there was a months-long period that you went through where you kind of knew this was coming. You want to talk a little bit about that process because it was fascinating to watch.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, again, I would argue probably if you were to appoint a county attorney or a sheriff, probably the two big, just sort of the biggest impact on the county. And so we wanted to make sure we got that right. And so what we did, a little different than how we had handled the supervisor appointment that led to Jack Sellers, we actually appointed a citizens commission. And this Citizens Commission went through, and first of all, it was chaired by Judge Chris Skelly, so retired judge who has, you know, great reputation in the community. And then from there, we had a mixture of attorneys, non-attorneys. It was actually a 7-person commission, but there were some attorneys, some non-attorneys. There was racial diversity, geographic diversity. Really, we felt like this group represented political diversity in their background. We felt like this committee really did a great job of representing the diversity of Maricopa County. So they took the first cut of the applicants. There were 8. They winnowed that down to 5, and then it was up to the Board of Supervisors to select one. Out of those 5, we interviewed all 5 of those individuals, very highly qualified, excellent folks. But in the end, we felt that Alistair Adele, given her both, she had worked in the county attorney's office, she had had experience in the private sector, working with nonprofits. She just had that broad experience that put her in the best position to really hit the ground running. Because again, not only is Alistair immediately, became the county attorney, but then she will be facing election. She's already running for election in August. I mean, she'll have a primary election in November of next year. So we had to have someone who could go in, hit the ground running, do this job, but then also, be in a position to run for election next year.
Well, it's a huge responsibility. We had Alistair on, just so you know, last month, and so maybe some viewers watching this have gotten a chance to be introduced to her, because she wasn't, you had some former elected officials apply, you had some people who have run high-profile races before, and then you had career prosecutors like Alistair, who do obviously extremely important work, but of course aren't as known to the public, not even really probably close as people who have been out there and put their name on signs and so forth. So that is, I'm sure, an interesting transition for her. It's also running a very large office with a lot of employees. I think they have 400 or 500 attorneys. So it's a major prosecutorial, but also has other functions as well, office. So it's very diverse. And in the meantime, she's got a family and everything else. So it's quite a challenge for her. And there's no grace period, if you will, between the election and her getting a staff up and running. So I applaud you for not only making a good choice, but for making it a relatively seamless transition, as much as could be under circumstances that, you knew there was going to be an opening for a little bit, but she, of course, didn't know she was going to get picked. So you want to pick staffers. I mean, it's a tricky situation. Yeah,
and all of that is right. And I've just been so impressed how quickly she put a transition team in place, and then put key people in top roles. And of course, she's had some significant legal issues to advise the board on as soon as she got into office. That's right.
Yeah, she's your lawyer, and for all the other county offices as well.
Yes,
correct.
That's correct.
There's a lot going on, and big stakes, because how big is the Maricopa County budget?
Yeah, Maricopa County budget is $2.5 billion. Not as big as yours over here, but yeah, and I guess I didn't touch on that, but as well, not only do we have a balanced budget, able to increase funding into some key areas like public safety and homelessness, but also for the third year in a row, we did not increase the property tax rate. So again, I know for the property tax experts out there, people's valuations on their home increase. So some people may have a larger property tax bill to Maricopa County, but the rate has remained the same for 3 years, even though we've been the fastest growing county for the last 3 years. So we're very proud of that, and staff has done a great job to, again, continue to run our operations more efficiently.
Well, and as a resident in your district, I appreciate that. I'm also a resident of the fastest growing city that resides in the fastest growing county in the country. So a lot of challenges that come with that. You mentioned transportation earlier, but there's just a lot of moving parts, and I think your chairmanship, we've been served well by you as the chair, but there were challenges that you could never have anticipated, and sadly, we're going to talk about one of the latter, whereas with the previous two, you at least had some notice, even if the applicants who were selected didn't necessarily have notice. You sort of knew what you were in for there, with a couple months of grace period to make educated decisions. Not so, of course, with the county assessor. And so do you want to talk a little bit about that situation? It's been in the news a lot, but I'm sure the viewers would like your perspective.
Yeah, and again, that's a really unfortunate situation. I think as probably a lot of your viewers know, on October 8th, our county assessor, Paul Peterson, was arrested. And I want to be very clear, as I've been on all...
I assume you had no notice.
No,
this came out of the blue.
No notice, no notice at all. I found out when the rest of the public did, quite frankly. We were not tipped off in any way like that. And I want to be clear, like I've been on all the, opportunities I've had to speak to the media. I believe, I'm an attorney. I believe very strongly in the fact that all criminal defendants are innocent until proven guilty, and I feel the same way about Paul Peterson. Having said that, the Board of Supervisors does have a special responsibility, in particular over the office of the county assessor, and I think that's for obvious reasons, because this is the office that values the properties upon which the property tax rate is based. And so when we were faced with the situation where the county assessor was in custody for several weeks. We looked at our legal options. We received legal advice from the county attorney, and we made a determination under Arizona law to suspend the county assessor, Paul Peterson. We did that on October 28th.
And that was a statute that was in place. That wasn't something new that you made up for this particular circumstance.
No, that's
it maybe didn't anticipate this circumstance, but it anticipated a circumstance.
Yes, and specifically, the statute talks about neglect of duty. And again, we moved very deliberatively on this, but we made a determination in the vote, and the board voted unanimously that there was neglect of duty on two bases. First, because Mr. Peterson was in custody from October 28th until
out
October
of state,
29th.
correct? I mean, he was not.
Well, some of it was here in Maricopa County, and
beginning,
then some of that time was in the state of Arkansas. And secondly, we determined that there was a neglect of duty because I called for an audit to be done to determine what was going on in that office, specifically with regard to Mr. Peterson's office and computer equipment. And the audit determined that there were numerous documents on Mr. Peterson's computer relating to this adoption practice, so his private legal practice, which has been the basis of these indictments in multiple jurisdictions. So that's why we took that action. And then subsequently, Mr. Peterson has retained an attorney, and he has chosen to appeal that suspension, and he has every right to do that under Arizona law. And so we have set that hearing. We will have a hearing of the Board of Supervisors on December 11th, where Mr. Peterson's attorney will have the opportunity to present testimony as to why we should overturn our decision. And obviously we will give Mr. Peterson the due process rights that he deserves, and he'll have that opportunity to make his case, and the board will be there to listen and deliberate.
So the 120 days expires. If you forgive me for asking, what then?
Yeah. So again, that's as I've told reporters when I've been asked, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But again, at this time, we suspended him for 120 days, and also I failed to mention that the board then 2 days later, we voted unanimously to have Bill Wiley take over as the administrator over the assessor's office. Bill Wiley was our head of the flood control district. He was also the head of air quality. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. I heard he did a heck of a job over here as the streets director.
Here, which I know he considers the capstone and the pinnacle of his career, but now it's back to the county and working with you. How did you select Bill? What was that process like? Because obviously, again, it was really on the fly there. You didn't have any real notice or probably even expectation when this first happened before you came across the 120-day statute.
Yeah, so of course you can imagine it was very important that we get a steady hand down there in the assessor's office. Again, there have been weeks without any leadership in that assessor position. And so we wanted to go out and find someone who knew the county, knew how to operate in government. And again, my understanding was he came over here in just 3 months, did a great job in the streets department. So for me, that was kind of the cherry on top, that someone who could come in a short period of time.
I worked with him, very sharp guy.
Yeah, just to give that stability. And he's not going down there to change everything, but to take a look, and if there are opportunities where he can bring a focus, and guess what? He's done that already. I just had a meeting with him this morning where he was able to provide some great leadership on some issues that we have in the assessor's office. So that's what we were looking for. And again, you can imagine there was that real comfort level with the board. All of us had worked with him, both in that flood control position, and many of us had worked with him in the air quality position. In fact, when I was on the council, I was on this air quality, they had a committee at that time of council members, and I worked with Bill back then, and he did a great job.
Well, and I don't expect you to know all this chapter and verse, but the assessor has a large budget. Yes. It's got a big responsibility.
Yep, hundreds of
employees, exactly, and you've got to meet payroll. You can't miss deadlines. You can't, there's a lot of stakes. It helps fund the rest of the operation. So there's really no wiggle room to miss, statutory deadlines and so forth. But it sounds like you're confident everything is on track despite Mr. Peterson's issues and absence now from the position, that Mr. Wiley will be able to keep things going and the residents won't for their purposes in terms of getting paperwork and so forth, there won't be, it'll be a seamless transition, I guess is the way.
Yes, yes. Humbly, I would suggest that the board has, this is a very unusual circumstance, but I believe that the board utilized the tools that were there to put someone like Bill Wiley in this position, and so we feel very confident with what's being done in the assessor's office right now.
Well, as you know, because we've been through this process, we've replaced council members. You replaced a colleague this year. So that's one thing, but it's also 1/5 or 1/9, or in our case last year, 2/9. The legislative body can still move forward and function. There are replacements for the mayor and so forth. This, with the executive offices that we're talking about, these are major operations. Not that a council office isn't, but you're not solely in control of hundreds of employees trying to send out really probably millions of pieces of paper, more or less. That's a big responsibility, and I commend you for under adverse circumstances. I think getting both picks right and having people in there who can be, as you suggest, a steady hand until, I guess, the next election cycle or however things shake out next year.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the incredible professionalism of the people in the assessor's office. People have been there for years, do a great job. They're just wanting to focus on their jobs, and that's exactly what they did. Even with all this going on in the media, I was so impressed by that. And I actually, as soon as we selected Bill Wiley, I walked him down and met with the top leadership. And you could just see in their eyes, first of all, the toll that some of this had taken on them, but also that sense of relief that, they had someone here and that the board was there to partner with them. And that's been the approach here. This has not been about pitting people against one another at all. It's been, how can we all join together and continue to do this important work for the taxpayers of Maricopa County?
Well, it's wrapping up a tumultuous year. I think that might be the right word, perhaps more than you might have expected, but you still move forward and achieve goals. I mean, each of you has a big responsibility. You represent about 900,000 people each. I believe the entirety of the 200,000 people that I represent in District 2 live in your supervisory district, so we work quite a bit together. We've got issues with washes and other issues that we have partnered up on, and obviously we have a long working experience. You've had the odd circumstance of having to quickly find replacements for two of your colleagues because those other elected officials are colleagues, but at the same time, they are independent contractors, I guess, if you will. You're setting their budget, and that's come up before in disagreements between other electeds and the board. How does that work? And now, of course, you have the difference of you've appointed a couple of the replacements as well.
Yeah. So, that's, I'm happy you asked about that. It's a really collaborative process.
I would imagine it would have to be.
Yeah, no, it really has been. So, people are working on that process now, starting to, we have our budget office that reaches out to all these independent electeds, start working on things, start getting an idea of what the year is going to look like ahead. Obviously, we bring in, experts in economics, expert forecasters, just like I know the city does, to get an idea of what things are going to look like.
And it is an idea, folks. It is not.
Absolutely.
Our guys have been very accurate the last few years, but
Yep.
there have been years where
Yes,
that hasn't
sir.
been the case. People are trying their best. It's just,
That's right.
if they knew what the economy was exactly going to do, they'd be investing and they'd be Warren Buffett rather than.
Yeah, and that's why, and that's right, and that's why the residents of District 2 are so fortunate that they have you there, because you are always looking at that. You're not looking at the sunny expectations, but again, sort of more that worst case scenario. Let's budget to that. That's always been your focus.
And there's a balance between, the best case and the worst case. Maybe you don't go for the worst case, but you want to be on the conservative end, or you could get burned, which we did a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate that.
But you're doing it for other electeds
Yeah.
too, so the stakes are even higher in some respects.
Yeah, and so then we have this preliminary work, and then in January, all of those elected officials come before the board and give us a sense, kind of a snapshot. This is what we're looking at. We may have these needs on the labor side. We may have some major capital expenses. Like, for example, the sheriff came to us last year and said, I need to get 2 planes. We ended up only giving him 1. And, he had his good reasons for that. But that sort of give and take, you go from that level at the more sort of, general level, and then in the months after that, then you really get into the specifics on the budget, have a lot of one-on-one meetings. I mean, I had all those as chair with the individual electeds, and I have to tell you, they were all very professional, and we were able to reach agreement on all this. So it's a good process. I mean, there's give and take. It's not all agreement, but in the end, we end up in a good position, and I think it's a great example on how county government and just in general on how government can work in Arizona.
So you indicate to them your interests in their office, what you'd like them to focus on. They don't necessarily have to do it.
Yep.
They are basically dependent on your vote, if I understand the process right, to get the budget for what they want to do. So I can see why a collaborative effort is much better than the alternative. But do they ever look at each other? Because they're competing for a budget pie, so they are sort of competing. Do they work together apart from you?
You know,
or is that an unfair question?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not being in their shoes, it'd probably be a bit of speculation for me to say that. But it doesn't seem, I mean, it's certainly not a situation where they're sort of pitting one another, you know, pitting themselves against one another. It does really seem to be collaborative, and it really does seem to be, this is what I need, you know, and this is my focus. And, you know, the one has been on of course, our greatest asset in Maricopa County, which is our people. And we've had real challenges. As you know, this is a tight labor market. So we've lost a lot of people, and we've tried to, we have a pay for...
People have options.
Yeah,
which is great. It's a great thing.
It is. We have a pay for performance program over there. And so we were able to put some funds into that to allow them to incentivize those people who are doing a great job over there, because we do understand that there are other options. But having said that, again, we do understand that every single dollar that is spent over there is the taxpayer dollar. So like you were talking about that balance before, it's that balance of having those good quality employees and giving them the incentives they need to stay on board while still remembering that these are taxpayer dollars and doing everything we can to keep that property tax rate level.
All right, Chairman. And don't get used to me calling you that either. But
It's
I appreciate very much.
end,
It's coming to an end anyway. I appreciate very much you being on the show. And I know we had some controversial topics, excuse me, to talk about. So I appreciate very much that you were willing to do so. And I wish we had more time to chat.
Well, thanks for having me. And again, one of the things that made it so easy to be chairman was the partnership I had with you throughout the year on so many issues. So thanks for the great work that you do. You're benefiting not only city residents, but you're also benefiting Maricopa County residents with your great leadership.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And if you have any comments or questions, please call my office at 602-262-7445 or visit my website, phoenix.gov/district2. And we look forward to seeing you next time on The Issues.